everyone. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing well on this Memorial Day weekend, enjoying their times with their families and their friends. I am Sister Khadra. I am based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I am part of the Back to School Core team. I am so excited for this month's session. It's such an important topic for pretty much anyone, not just for parents, but for people that are, wanting to be parents in the future, inshallah. And, whether or not you're struggling with, you know, navigating the parenting life, because you never know what's going to happen. And it's better to be, prepared than to be unprepared, inshallah. So I just wanted to give a quick, you know, description of what the back to school program is. So I know many of you have an idea, but it just started out as a giveaway of supplies for students in need all across the country. But now, alhamdulillah, it's become such a big program. So it's pretty much divided into three parts, which is parents, students, and teachers. And we are trying our best to basically support, our parents, our teachers, and our students, and just empowering them to, be the best that they can be through education. So with our live sessions, this is something that we are willing to do to support our parents. Our students are the giveaways that we do every summer. We're actually having all of our offices across the nation prepare for this right now, doing supply drives, getting volunteers that can, go above and beyond for their office. So yeah, look out for that. Our mega event is on August 5th, I believe, which is a Saturday. And we're going close to 1 million backpacks distributed. So it's a huge milestone, and it's such a blessing to be able to support our students in this way. And then our teachers. We have our Empower grant, which is a grant that we are giving to teachers at qualified registered schools, elementary and middle school, to basically help them, buy supplies or anything else that they need for their classroom. So, be on the lookout for that. That is opening on June 20th and will close on July 20th. So we are trying to spread the word for that as well, and just trying to, support as many teachers as we can, and really revolving around, the students. So at the end, I'll talk about our next live session. But before I do that, we are going to get into our speaker for today, which is our dear sister, Dina. She is based in SoCal, California, but she's actually currently at the convention, which we'll also talk a little bit about, mashallah, at the ICNA Mass Convention. And I'll read her bio right now. So she is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a director of counseling services at Ignore Leaves Crescent Counseling Center in Fullerton. She also works in mental health and recovery services for the Orange County Healthcare Agency. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Social Behavior and a teaching credential from the University of California, Irvine. She currently serves on the board of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, and her passion is in positive psychology and personal development, and seeks to empower the community with skills to promote positive mindsets and lifestyles. So we are so happy to have Sister Dina. We are going to bring her on right now and, just start a conversation about this topic. So welcome, Sister Dina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for all the work that you all do behind the scenes and that you do throughout the year to make sure that the parents and the teachers and the students are all supported. So jazakumullah khair for this beautiful effort.
So yeah, I just wanted to start off just to open up why we're actually talking about mental health and mental health regarding our teenagers. So our topic is fostering youth, fostering their mind, body, and their soul. So why do you think, Dina, why do you think it's important to even address this topic?
That is a great question. So I'm going to do a little bit of just education piece on when we say mental health, because sometimes people think mental health, if we're going to talk about mental health, they'll think of like severe mental illness, right? So sometimes when we hear that phrase or we hear those words, our mind goes to maybe somebody who is not may be experiencing, schizophrenia or severe depression, or like a psychotic episode of psychosis where they may lose touch with reality. But I want to kind of just start off with the basic definition of mental health. It's a state of mental well-being, right? It helps people cope with life stressors, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community, right? So if we break that down, how many of us here experience stress in our life? Right? All of us are going to experience stress just based on the fact that we're human. We're going to have those experiences. So how do we cope with it? That's an element of our mental health. Realize our abilities. Everybody has potential. And so do we challenge ourselves to grow and continue? Are we challenging those around us to grow and for them to be able to achieve their potential, right? To kind of constantly strive for more in a healthy way. Learn well and work well. So we're able to have meaningful work that we do that sustains our livelihood. Maybe we make money from it, and we're able to contribute that way. And then right after that, contribute to our community. Because we're social beings. We gain meaning from being with others, with having a sense of community. So all of that pertains to our mental health. So why is it important to talk about that? Well, we've just barely coming out of a global pandemic, right? And if we think about it, how many of us have had our we've had changes in our lives? Mm-hmm. Would you say that you've experienced stress during the past 3 years for different reasons, right? Work. Some people may have lost their jobs, may have had shifts in their working conditions. But when we look at our children, right, they went from students going to school and socializing with others. That's all part of their development, part of how they learn and how they grow. So when we shift that into a lockdown, where now all of their education was basically like their socializing element has been reduced. They miss out on going to school and interacting with their peers and interacting with their teachers. And now they're just limited to a screen. That has impacted our youth a lot. And so being aware of the impact, being aware of what is it that we can do as parents, as adults in their lives to support them, it's a huge, huge deal. So it's part of why we're talking about that today, just a little bit of the background piece.
Yes, thank you so much for just defining what mental health is, and just explaining the importance of it. And from the back to school, and like I said in the beginning, we're all centered around the betterment of children, right? So this was a no-brainer to do during Mental Health Awareness Month. So yeah, I'm just excited to just talk about all the key things. I know it's a lot, but we'll just try to narrow down on things that, a lot of people are struggling with. So so I had a question for you, Dina. So how do we know when our child's behavior is normal, or, I say normal in quotation marks, because everyone has their own normal, right? Or concerning, regarding their mental health? How do we know, how do we draw the line?
That's a great question, and a question we get a lot of times in terms of I don't know if they're just if this is just their typical development, because obviously there's a lot of changes that youth go through when they're shifting from from the tweens to the teen years and adolescence. Hormones are changing with them. They're going through changes physically, physiologically, all of these changes socially. There's always that time where they're trying to figure out who they are, where they fit in. So now we go from being kids where maybe our parents made a lot of the decisions for us, or they kind of cultivated a lot of our thinking, right? They were very intentional with who we were surrounded with as kids. Now we're becoming teenagers where, wait a minute, hold on. My parents say one thing, but now my friends kind of, wait, not all families do things the same way. That creates, they're trying to figure out and navigate who am I? What do I stand for? What do I like? What do I have a preference for in terms of maybe it's even subjects in school, or just sports or activities that they enjoy doing. So they're trying to identify who they are, right? What their passions are that they want to pursue, but there's all these changes that are happening inside of them. And so part of adolescent development is a little bit of a differentiation from our parents. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe before we just did whatever our parents said, we kind of followed, we had no say. Now it's like, wait a minute, I don't necessarily want to spend all my time with my family. Like, kind of want to hang out with my friends. And parents will feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, every child is different. Every person is different in terms of what their temperament is. So, one of the things to identify or to look for are changes, like noticeable changes. So, is it typical for teens to want to spend maybe kind of want to spend more time, either alone or with their friends more than with their families? Yes. Okay. But is it typical for them to want to just isolate and spend time with nobody, just completely on their own and really not socialize? That part may be concerning because
Mm-hmm.
that's not the typical part. Is it typical for them to kind of change? Their interests may change. Yes, maybe they grew up and they were playing soccer, and now as they got a little bit older, they want to maybe pursue something different. That part maybe it may be okay. But if now they have no interest in anything, so now it's like, no, they don't want to do anything at all. They just kind of want to just, isolate and be on their, by themselves. That part would be concerning. So it's fine tuning those little pieces. Maybe they don't want to share everything with their parents, right? They want a little bit of privacy. There's a difference between privacy and secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just more of I want my own space? Maybe, yes, it's one thing, but are they overreacting if anybody like comes into the room, or if anybody, um, if anyone is like kind of looking through or asking questions about just about conversations, or even just about their friends, where now we feel like it's more of a secret. There's almost a wall. That part may be concerning, but it's healthy in a way for them to go through discovering who they are. So that part we want to be able to support them in that process and not take it personal just because, they're not wanting to spend every waking moment, or they may differ. We as parents, we want to encourage healthy conversations. And part of healthy conversations is difference in opinion, right? Our
Yeah.
kids they're not mini me's.
Mm-hmm.
They're not mini us's. They're their own individual person, and
Mm-hmm.
what we can do and how we talk to them and how we support even the conversations from an intellectual perspective. If I look at it and we look at the parenting relationship where the parent is here and the child is here, and it's always talking down to them, or I know everything up here and you just have to do what I say because you don't know it all, but I
Yeah.
do. How do we cultivate critical thinking? How do we cultivate leaders who are going to be able to take a stand, to identify what they believe in? And
Mm-hmm.
in the society where, I mean, let's be real, especially, growing up here, if we're raising our children in the United States, we're not the mainstream. Like, Islam is not the Islamic values necessarily, they're not the mainstream values. So we're really raising them against the current. So how do we support them in having the confidence to believe in what they believe in and respectfully stand for what they stand for in a society that they may sometimes have to be the only one who's saying something, right? Or the only one who's not doing something? That's big. That's
Yeah.
huge. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even as adults, I'm just saying that, I'm thinking about like us, like, okay, there's certain times where we're like, we're just going to stay quiet, or we're going to we're going to hide out, because what does it mean to be the one who's saying something that's different than everybody else? It's not easy, because again, we're social beings and we care about fitting into the group, because that ensures like our connections with people, our safety.
Yeah, how oftentimes you just got me thinking, because even as adults, like, when someone hasn't seen you in a while, or, if you work with this person, and they're asking you, how are you doing? You're like, good, alhamdulillah. And it just stays there, right? Like, for the most part, you don't get into it, right? Even if you're
Yeah.
going through something challenging or whatnot. So you imagine, your teenage, child, they're going through, so many different challenges at school, regardless if it's an Islamic school or non-Islamic school. So how do you, are you going to just say, okay, all right, you said everything's good, and move on, or are you actually going to like, dig deep and, really try to find out, what they're going through? And I feel like that's our responsibility, right?
And
As parents.
it is our responsibility, and it's a great question. So if we can, this is my little piece for parents, and I hope they hear this very well. You're doing awesome. You're doing the best you can. Like, you really are, because you're parenting teens right now at a time that's so different than how it was for you growing up. And so
Yes.
first off, I want to offer that sense of empathy to the parents. Like, there's no guidebook. You couldn't have foreseen that, for example, we're going to get to a point where GPT is part of our day-to-day conversation.
Just learning about this now.
Where we've got AI, where, I mean, think about it. Like, we probably remember a time before internet. Maybe for the younger ones, but for the most part, I think a good number of the parents, you can at least remember. Maybe there was a time before smartphone where it was like a cell phone. It was a flip phone, and it was just a ginormous block that you had to carry around. I know I'm dating some of us here. It's okay.
All good. Yeah.
But a time before smartphones. So the times are different to begin with. And so if we think about that, what we were exposed to in schools and in society and on TV and in shows and on the radio and just from conversations on social media, like what we were exposed to, so different than what they're exposed to today. And what we have to realize is all of the social media stuff, like, now it doesn't matter if your child is in a Muslim school or they're homeschooled or they're in a pub, like the exposure, they're exposed to it all. So the idea of we're going to shelter people and we're going to, put them in a bubble, that does not set people up to win. That's not going to set our youth up to win when they do get exposed to things, because they're going to hear about it. They're going to hear about it. So are we having the conversations, being able to frame it also from an Islamic perspective so we can have a healthy Islamic identity? Yeah. Or are they going to hear about it from outside, have questions, fear to talk to us as the parents, and then just kind of, formulate their own understanding of it, which oftentimes, unfortunately, is going to be something that is against or can be against our Islamic teachings. So if we have to train ourselves as the adults to become more comfortable with these conversations, and some of the conversations are going to be uncomfortable. Some of them will. And if we can get to a point where we can embrace the discomfort and understand that, as adults, we don't have to have all the answers. Okay. But what we can do is create an environment where it's safe to ask questions, where it's safe to come up, it's safe to have a difference in opinion. It's safe to not understand or maybe question things that might be huge. I always think of this. I remember growing up, and I'm sure many of us, at some point in time, we have the question of like, okay, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. Who created Allah? Right? And this may be something as a child. And chances are, I'm going to make an assumption that many of the people here have had that question at some point in their life, right? How that question is handled. When you had that question, did you not ever ask it because you just knew it was just an unacceptable question to ask? Yeah. Or did you ask it and get faced with astaghfirullah, say this is shaitan? Or were you faced with, that's a great question, let's look at it. So even just from that, right? And so now that, again, those were our parents and the best that they knew how to do with information they had at the time. But if we look at that example, Islamically, like, there's no question off limits. Like, everything we can discuss. That's the beauty of our deen too. It's not like forget it, don't talk about that. Like, you can't ask that. No, we can ask and have conversations around it and be able to have it informed. And if we as the parents don't have the answer, guess what? We can model what it's like to actually not know everything and not be perfect to our kids. And so we tell them, that is a great question. Let's look and see, so what the scholars say, or let's look and see, let's go to the experts on this one and find the answer. Let's research it together. And creating that time together where we can, there's more of, allowing them to be able to find the answer. We're empowering them to be able to think for themselves and refer back to our Islamic guidance and refer back to our, our Islamic scholars, so that it's still within the realm of our deen, but we're allowing them to be able to find that answer. And there's going to be differences in opinion on certain things, and that's okay too, because all of that is, creates a sound, confident person versus I'm too scared to like mess up. I'm too scared to ask the wrong question. I'm too scared of, and this fear. How do you achieve your potential when you're afraid of messing up?
That fear will only stop you, right? And it could actually be more detrimental, right, to the situation. So yeah, you mentioned so many great points, Sister Dina, mashallah. And I really want to go back to technology, because I feel like that is huge. I'm going to go back to, maybe putting our ages out there. But, I remember, growing up, and when my mom was on the phone, we couldn't use the internet at the same time. We used to tell her like, "Mom, okay, please get off the phone. We want to use the internet. We want to use the computer." So subhanAllah, now you can have so many different gadgets, what do you call it? Smartphones and computers attached to, your internet service. But yeah, that's like a whole nother ball game, right? Cyberbullying. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that. Like, there's so much more challenges that parents have to compete against now. So that's why I love that you're bringing up, empathy for the parents, because it's so much harder now than it was 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, do you mind speaking a little bit more about technology and the benefits, but also, the non-benefits of having that in our children's lives?
So I'm gonna get to that point. You remind me. Remember when there was only TV and there was nothing called streaming, and there were commercials? Okay, so this was even before DVR, right? You had to sit there through commercials.
Yeah.
And now it's like, of course, the commercials come in different forms because they're ads when you're not paying the premium to be able to what's it called? To subscriptions for that stuff. So the ads are still getting there. But one of the important things to really be aware of as parents, knowing that, I don't know how many people may have watched The Social Experiment on Netflix, right? And it really talks about right now how everything is algorithms, right? You and I, if I click on one article, right? And they did a lot of this research stuff, and they were looking at it in terms of with like the elections, or even in terms of like COVID, like as information was coming to us. You click on one article, all of a sudden you're going to start getting more suggestions for articles based on that. So you and I will open our Facebooks, our Instagrams, our, whatever it is, our TikToks. I don't have TikTok, but but if I did, we would open those, and then we'll have completely different information that's being given, that's being fed to us based on an algorithm. And so for the parents to know that whatever it is that's being that the child is being exposed to, you do one search. I know now a lot of us are kind of like wondering, okay, I just thought about this one item that I was like, oh, I'm going to go I really need this one thing. And somehow all of a sudden you open your email and there's an ad for that one item. It's like, okay, our phones are listening to us. But aside from that, it's a huge part of our life, and being able to, to assume that it's just a given, and you just give your child access to social media, to technology unsupervised, without discussing precautions, without discussing and having conversations about, the harms, or putting limits with helping them understand why. That is a recipe for disaster. We're not supporting them. Now we're basically letting someone else raise our child, because now they're getting exposed to articles and to ads for products and services that maybe are things that we're not okay with, right? But we don't even know, because we're not having these conversations and we're not informing them. Again, Google, you're just going to search something, and they're going to come up with whatever it is. Like, you're going to have a plethora of answers for things, but we have a responsibility to frame that piece. Cyberbullying, bullying in school to begin with. I know CARE had released they did a bullying survey for Muslim youth. So I'm speak specifically for California. they found that before the pandemic, about 47% of those who were surveyed reported that they had basically experienced bullying, right? And that's twice the national average. So like normally it's like maybe about 20% of the students feel that. With Muslims, it was more than double. Like, this is Muslims in California, but you can understand that it's probably going to, it's not going to be that much off in other states as well. It could even be higher in some other ones. So that's a concern. Cyberbullying is real. And unfortunately, when teens are going through, like, teens are very much, their cognitive development, like their ability to, to have that critical thinking part, or understand, like, we look at it, something happens, we're like, that's just one bad incident, right?
Yeah.
Like, for us, one bad comment can be like, well, someone kind of hurt my feelings. And we can put it in the context of, that's one statement in the, out of like 100 maybe that we hear in a week or something. For a teen, like, that one could be everything. Like, their concept of time, like, their 5 minutes is like forever, right? And if they're bored, it's like they just sitting there and it's like, I'm bored. Like, that's their whole life. So their ability to actually think of, of time, it's not the same that, as we have. Like, if they're 14 years old, okay, and they're 14 years of experience, of which how many were they really fully aware and engaged in, not just kind of like programmed by family. It's big. And so for your social circle to out you, or for someone to basically, constantly be putting you down, that's huge. And so how do we know that's even happening, right? That's one form, but we, that kind of brings us to the point of, how do we know that our teen is going through something? Yeah. And, for this one, you kind of mentioned everyone has their own, normal, but it's being able to recognize some of the signs. So we think sometimes we're like, oh, depression, that's just somebody who is, they're sad all the time. And that's not the only way it shows up, right? So if we're noticing, and I'll give a couple of little signs, and then I'm going to refer you all to a course maybe that, is worth taking, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But if you notice, for example, that their grades, usually grades are one of the first things that we start to notice, that their grades start to fall. Maybe they were a straight A student, and now they're slack. You're getting a report that's saying they're not turning in assignments, or now all of a sudden, like, their grades down to a C. It's huge. Sometimes we think depression is sadness, but sometimes it shows up as irritability and anger. Very short-tempered, very, easily irritated. Every little thing irritates them, and you're like, this isn't. And your child, so what their normal temperament was, and now it's like a little bit too extreme. They drop out of activities they used to enjoy. Maybe they used to go to they used to love kind of going to youth group, or going to soccer practice with their friends, and now they don't want to do that. They're getting more sick, or they're complaining more, like tummy aches or headaches or something. Like, now they're having more physical expressions of stuff. They could be engaging in dangerous behavior. If we're being real, also, like, we have to be comfortable in talking about self-harm and talking about suicide. Like, these are things we need to talk about. And then if they're always tired, now it's normal. There's a certain point where they're going to sleep a lot more than normal. Okay, that's okay. But if it's excessive, where they never have energy, that's going to be really, really, like, that's a big indicator that, okay, something's up. So this brings me to the point where, when our child has a fever, right? Or they broke, maybe they had an injury, they were playing a sport, and they fractured a bone, we're automatically like, boom, we're there at the, at the doctor's office, figuring out what's going on, making sure we get the temperature under control, making sure that, whatever symptoms are happening, that we're getting everything that we can to make sure that they are safe and they're healthy, right? Mental health is the same. It's just, it looks a little bit differently. And so, are we reaching out to the, trained clinicians? Are we reaching out to people who have the information that they're able to help? to make sure that we're supporting them. We're teaching them healthy coping styles, right? We're helping them navigate this world that is so different than we could ever have imagined growing up in. We're navigating it as adults, and we have hopefully a lot of tools and resources.
Yes.
So I said I was going to mention a training. There's something called mental health first aid, and it exists in two main forms right now. One of them is just for adults who just are, live and work with other adults or have adult friends and family members, of supporting them in noticing the signs and symptoms of mental health challenges and mental health problems, and how to intervene, how to connect people with resources, how to have a conversation if we are concerned about someone who is showing signs or symptoms, or maybe even in a crisis, right? It talks a little bit about substance use, talks a little bit about suicide, and how to have conversations around that. There's another form that is specifically designed for adults who work with youth, and it's called Youth Mental Health First Aid. And so those are two resources, trainings. I mean, reach out. They're offered a lot of times in different communities at no cost. That can be arranged and facilitated because we want people to get more comfortable. Like, we have a responsibility to continue to learn. And so we have to be able to navigate how to have some of these difficult conversations with our youth. And that requires us to get, like I said in the beginning, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because some of those conversations are going to be not comfortable. Like, I don't think the conversation around suicide ever gets comfortable. And I'm a trained professional, right? But knowing that there are resources, understanding that most people, vast majority of people who may have the thought of suicide, it's in that moment they feel hopeless or helpless, and they don't see another way. So if we can support them and connecting them to see that there are other ways, that can reduce the stress. So it's uncomfortable, but the payoff is at least we are supporting them in getting the help and in getting better, instead of having them experience those struggles alone.
Yes, and just being educated, like you said, we have to do our part, right? As parents, as even siblings, as folks that are working in a field that's in contact with people that are going through tough times. I myself took the adult mental health first aid session, and it was so beneficial, mashallah. Just getting more, because I'm not a licensed therapist, right? But I can maybe pinpoint the signs or the symptoms of a client that's coming to my office and that wants to see a therapist, right? Or that needs some type of help for their child. So it's so important to just be aware of something, so that you can be that person to to guide them in some way, right? So we have some questions coming in, so let me just see which one we can pull up here. So I know we were talking a lot about the youth in schools, and how, we have, and I say we because I remember, feeling that way. Like in high school, you want to feel that sense of belonging, right? You don't want to stand out really. You want to have friends, right? So we have someone asking on Facebook, what is the answer to when your child comes to you showing their frustration of not finding friends? Then they try to, but other kids do not want to play with them, especially when your child is physically much taller or bigger than their classmates. So what can you say to that, Sister Dina? How can parents help their children navigate these type of situations?
So first off, I think it's, I'll always say that we get a lot of referrals sometimes that parents want to bring their kids into, they want to do a counseling session, for example, for their child, or, and sometimes it's the parent. Like, as parents, we need that support too. So being able to not be afraid to also reach out and get that support of just someone being there with us, maybe guiding us, maybe finding like certain support groups or things, because parenting in and of itself, I know we were at a lecture yesterday and the speaker said, becoming a parent is very easy, but one of the most difficult things you can do is parent a child, right? Like the parenting part. Again, there's no guidebook for all, here's the frequently asked questions. Like, we don't entirely have that. And so first off, acknowledging for the parent that that's probably really hard for the parent themselves to feel like, we here's my child and my child is struggling. So the parent's
Yeah.
probably feeling hurt or feeling that pain, having that empathy for their child. So one, acknowledging that piece. Two, recognizing what's their relationship with the child, right? So the child's already struggling. Do they have a safe space? I mean, obviously it sounds from here that the child being able to show their frustration or maybe express in some way or form to the parent that they're having a hard time finding friends, somewhere there, hopefully that's a healthy relationship with the parents, and the kid knows that they can go to the parent and share that with them. Part of it becomes the education part, becomes maybe getting them some support, because unfortunately, yes, we're social beings, and sometimes our social circles can be very mean.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's learned behavior. So are we showing compassion? Did the other kids in school, do they have compassion modeled, for them? And so we can't control that piece, but we can support our child. How do we have the social skills? How do we build their confidence? So at least at home, do they feel confident? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel seen? Do they feel heard? Those are things that at least if there's that healthy foundation,
yeah,
then we can turn around and normalize. We can share some experiences about how it's hard, and we have to validate. So creating, like, sometimes it's sitting with the child, not having the answer, but just saying, wow, like that sounds like it's really, really hard. Like, let's think about this together. And not just offering a solution, because sometimes we want to fix it because we're uncomfortable, because we don't want to see them hurting. So we want to offer some ideas and recommendations of what they should do before we fully listened to, like, really let them know that we hear how challenging this struggle is for them. So validating their experiences, validating their feelings, making sure that we're providing them with that emotional support for them to feel confident, because really their confidence and their self-esteem, a lot of it starts, I mean, we have a huge role in that as parents with our children in the house from when they're young.
Absolutely.
Do they have a voice? Do they feel like they have a voice? Or anytime they have, if they want something, are they always told why they shouldn't want it, or they shouldn't behave a certain way, or they shouldn't say something without really understanding? So if we can model that healthy dynamic with them, we can buffer some of the the hardships they may face at school. And then we can work with them. Like, let's figure it out. And we may not have the answer as parent. Maybe we send them, we find, a therapist that can support the child. And okay, let's look at this. How can we give them the social skills if that's what's needed, right? Or how do we compensate in other circles? Like, what are some of the solutions that we can do to support our child?
Absolutely. So I see another question, and I feel like you did a really good job already kind of addressing this issue, but I'll just read the comment out loud. It seems like teenagers belong to a different species with their unique language, culture, and entertainment preferences. As a result, many parents struggle to communicate effectively and maintain a healthy relationship with their teenage children. You often appear unavailable to their families. Are there any step-by-step practical guidelines to bridge this gap and foster a nourishing connection? The thing that really stood out to me, well, there's a few things that stood out to me, but the different species, right? We always say, like, oh, my parents just don't understand me, so they can't give me practical advice. Like, they don't know how it is growing up in this country as a first generation. There's so many things that, we hear what teenagers say, and what, we ourselves probably went through. So yeah, what step-by-step practical guidelines?
So I'd say number one, you're absolutely right about a different species. And then I'll invite all of us to go back to when we were teens and how we thought. Like, our parents just felt like they were a whole other, like, they just didn't know, right? They don't get what we're going through. So getting a little bit of that empathy where we can put ourselves in their shoes, if we can just kind of take a trip down memory lane and remember what that was like when we were teenagers. Yes, the times were different, but chances are we also felt that disconnect, or felt like our parents just didn't get us. So I don't think the teens are looking for, like, they may think we're unhip or we're uncool or we're just such a, oh, my parents are boring, or they're, whatever language it is that they use, or eye rolls that they have. And we may think what they want is someone who speaks their language and just is like one of them. They don't want someone who's one of them. They don't know how to put it in words, but somewhere in there, we see this as kids too. They push the boundaries, right? A lot of times, like, we think, okay, kids just want to be able to do whatever they want to do. No, they really need structure for them to thrive, but they're going to push, right? They're going to ask to stay up a little bit later. They're going to not want to eat the healthy food, and they're just going to want to have the cookie, right? And it's because they're dealing with their, like, just, immediate urges of what they want right now, because that's what tastes good or that's what feels good. Yeah. But in a way, having those boundaries, having the structure, having the scheduled, like, some type of a routine for them is actually, it's very psychologically healthy for them, and it gives them a sense of safety because things are predictable. Even though they're kicking and screaming and they're having their tantrum and they don't want to go to sleep, and you think that, oh, I'll just let them stay up. It's so weird, but like in a way that they're not even aware of. It's like they want the structure and the routine because it gives, like, they know what to expect, even though they're going to fight you on it. Teens are kind of the same way, in a way. So it's not that we just let them be and leave them and, to do whatever it is that they want. We communicate in certain ways and we can say it, like, listen, I get it. Like, you and your friends, it's understanding what their needs are. They're going to need to have some time, we don't want to be disrespecting their language. I mean, we can address, we may differ, we may disagree, we may want to have conversations around it, but to disrespect their choices, to disrespect their generation is going to actually create a rift where they're going to shut down and not want to talk. I may not agree with what they're doing, but the truth is, it's their reality. This is their world. So how do I support them by letting them know that it's like, I get it. Like, it's, let's talk about it. Let's have that channel of that line of communication. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say that part of the practical, step by step is starting before they become teens. It doesn't just turn into like, oh, they're teenagers now. Like, they've, here we go. We're going to completely shift everything. Like, we build the foundation from when they're younger. Now, if we didn't build the solid foundation, does it mean that's it? There's no hope for us? No, there's always hope. And we can, there's things that we can do, ways, we can even go to some type of counselors that can kind of work with the family in terms of better understanding, or even the parent can go to learn some resources or take a parenting class on how to adjust some of their practices to be able to better connect and communicate with the child. So it starts from earlier on, and then it becomes more of validating again their experience. So like I said, one of the biggest things that we can do is to create that rift is to start like disrespecting or shunning or minimizing or belittling their generation or their culture, because they do have a separate culture and it's things that we're not familiar with. So it's keeping that line of interaction open. It's always having that respect, always respect. Even when they're disrespecting us, mm-hmm. There's a way that we respect ourselves by kind of drawing the line and being like, we're not going to, but not crossing, like not going into it where it's tit for tat, because then it becomes we're one of them and we're not. We are at the end of the day the parent. So we have that responsibility of being the more mature, wise adult in the dynamic that can, really be that backbone for them.
Yes. And I'm glad you touched upon like resources such as like, therapy and reaching out to those different resources. We all know, mental health is probably, taboo even in non-Muslim communities, but imagine even within, Muslim communities, it's not. Alhamdulillah, I've definitely seen a change, and, we're becoming more comfortable in discussing these matters. But I can tell you, there's still so many people that don't want to talk about it, or the older generation is just like, they'll be fine, like we don't really need to, that's not something that that needs to be discussed. Like, how can we, like, from your experience, right, in California and working with the community there, how would you say how the language has been and the culture has been around, mental health in general? Have you seen progress at all?
I'd say we're shifting and we're making strides. A couple of years back, this is way this is wow, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, I was doing some work with a Muslim school. And I mean, the students were all, I mean, for them, it was like they wanted to go to the counselor. Like it was just more of like, I'm going to my therapy session. And they were all excited about it. And you know what I mean? Like with them,
Yeah.
it was more of however way it was, maybe it was just that specific school.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's a piece of that. The kids have it much more normalized now. The teens have it, the youth have it a lot more normalized. Parents are seeing the difference. Again, we talk about mental health. It's such a big umbrella word. And the reason I like am intentional with continuing to use it is because it doesn't just mean there's a severe issue. Like again, we talk about physical health. We, you know, very openly, very easily. Let's talk about mental health. Parenting skills can go under mental health because how we parent our child can directly be related to their development. Are they growing into healthy, well-adjusted youth that are going to become, you know, inshallah, healthy, well-adjusted adults? Or are they growing up feeling very ashamed of who they are, afraid to speak up, torn, not knowing where they fit in, experiencing like no matter what they do, they're not good enough? You know, is that what? So there's a parallel between them. But again, we're not expected to just know everything. Like we're learning too. We're adjusting and adapting. And so parents have that, you know, this is the part I see the difference happening where now it's like, let's have, you know, one of the things I'm hoping to see more of is just more owning of just support circles. Because here's the thing, most parents, most people, I should say, think that when they're going through something that's difficult or something that they're struggling with, that they're the only person in the world going through it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we stay quiet and we're just like, oh, it's just me. And it grows in our mind and we're just like, oh my goodness, it's just me. Like I should be able to handle this. I should know what I'm supposed to do. I should be able to like, you know, have the right words. I should. And the truth is, if you go talk to other people, you'll realize so many other ones are going through the same thing. Right. So if we can kind of normalize our experience, and parenting is a whole culture. Like there's a whole culture of parents because we're not born knowing how, like there's so many environmental factors that play a role. Our society plays a role. Personal personality, each child's like temperament and their own personality plays a role. The dynamic of the parent and the child. Sometimes, you know, the couple, you know, the parents themselves, their dynamic together and how that impacts the child. So there's so many like moving pieces.
Yes.
So there's always that, you know, but the main thing is if we can communicate, even when we're being firm and setting boundaries with our youth, with our children, that love, respect, and kindness are there. We may be firm. We may have boundaries. We may say, we may not let them get away with everything. There may be consequences for certain things, but it's in a context of love, respect, and kindness. That gets communicated. And they remember it later when they're looking back into, like, in the moment, of course, you know, parents feel like they're always, no matter what they do, they're the monsters in the child's eyes or in the teen's eyes. But down the line, and that's the whole thing. It's like you're planting seeds and you're nourishing it, and you don't know when the flowers are going to bloom, and you don't know when the tree's going to start bearing fruit.
Yes. So it's, at the end of the day, it's very important for us as parents, as teachers, you know, adults in these, you know, children's lives to, you know, be that person to allow them to feel comfortable, right? And have a good relationship, right? If you were to choose between two people, right? Someone that you do have a, you know, a genuine, nice connection with, and one that you don't, who are you more, you know, willing to accept, you know, advice or, you know, willing to open up to? It's going to be the person that, you know, you have a good relationship with, right? So it's so important just for us to, you know, try our best and, you know, be there and be those role models that our teenagers need, inshallah.
And make dua always. Like it's always making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us in being the best that we can, to, you know, to protect our children and to guide us in being able to tap into the resources available. And it's really always remembering that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us as the parents, and ensuring that we're surrounding our children with the right circles. I know I was going to do a little plug-in for, for young Muslims, for the brothers and the sisters, the different programs that exist. It's tapping in and finding. We want we want the youth to be with other youth, have a mentor. They need mentors too. And sometimes they need mentors that aren't their parents, because they'll hear it differently, right?
Yeah.
And if they have a connection, a positive connection with another adult role model, that's okay. As a parent, I also have to be okay with my child not necessarily telling me everything. But the main thing is I want them to have a healthy connection with someone else that maybe, inshallah, I trust as well, where I know that they're going to be looking out for their best interest, that they're aligned with our values, that if something, you know what I mean? Like they help, because it takes a village. It does take a village to raise a child.
Yes. And I just want to talk about one more thing, and then to go into and maybe ending this session with practical tips, because that's always helpful. But I know even we were discussing, Sister Dina, about noticing when things are actual disorders or like signs of disorders versus something that maybe just be in emotional stress. So somebody actually just reminded me that from YouTube. So she mentioned that, my teenager feels uncomfortable talking in public. For example, they might ask the clerk questions when they want to buy something, but it becomes very, very difficult for her. There could be resources for that as well, right? That a parent can look for. Yeah.
And so this is a part of it is personality. Like, I don't know, some parents may have multiple children, and you'll notice that like one of them has no problem, no shame going up, asking, talking, like they're just much more naturally comfortable talking to people and asking for information, and someone else may be super, super, super shy and uncomfortable. So there is a personality element. And I'm reminded this right now, it's never comparing like siblings or the children to other people. Each child is their own person, right? And so it's looking at where they are. You may have a goal and an intention and a want and a desire for them to be able to be comfortable going up and talking to the clerk, asking questions. And sometimes we do that in a way of like, go ask, don't be afraid, don't be shy, go, and we'll force. So there's an element of maybe opening up and understanding like the challenge, not placing so much of a huge expectation that they're gonna fail, right, in their mind. So maybe for them, it's just being able to go like they're tinier steps. And this is something that sometimes, like a counselor would be able to help a little bit with, in terms of like developing that piece, in terms of just understanding like, okay, what does that look like? But it's also, sometimes it's also related to confidence. Like if every time they speak up, and you as a parent may know, there's no way that I would know this just from a question, but if they feel that every time they're always shunned when they say something or when they voice their opinion, so they learn to just stay quiet. And it could be a fear of not wanting to, sound not cool or mess up or accidentally say something inappropriate, right? Or something that people might laugh at, or messing up with the word they choose. How do we build that confidence up again? How do we get them, involved? And sometimes it's just taking little basic challenges. They might not be the person who's going to go out there and always feel comfortable, but we want to equip them and have the conversation. Validating their feelings, always, always, always important, right? Versus are we kind of like, and we don't have to, we may not think we're judging them, but if you feel as a child or a teen that your parent is not, like, in a way, the invalidation inherent in it is a judgment.
Yeah.
You're basically saying you shouldn't feel that way, which means that, oh my goodness, like, why are you feeling that way? Like, that's just so you shouldn't be. So it discounts their emotions. I know there's questions about therapy being expensive. Yes, that can be in certain places. I know that within some of the ICNA relief, depending on the state, depending on the location, those are resources that are offered at no cost. There's some insurance plans, but there's like within the nonprofit realm, or even connecting, we're happy to support and help find that process of just some more affordable options for counseling. Like I said, and I know like in California, and I can speak to a couple of the other states, there are sessions that are offered and available at no cost to families and to individuals who need it.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Dina. So yeah, definitely, we can have folks reach out to their local ICNUR Leap office, and then inshallah we can, guide people to more affordable options, inshallah. Um, so yeah, we're nearing the end, but I just wanted to give Sister Dina maybe a couple more minutes or anything, any last minute, practical tips or anything that you might, seem that you can add.
So just Jazakallah khair. Thank you. I mean, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in and asking questions, because I think this is the best way that we are able, like this is kind of our social learning. Other people ask questions, and then, we're able to benefit and learn as well. Some tips that we can take, I kind of mentioned a few of them, which is just if we ground ourselves in coming from love, respect, and kindness, right? Those three things really, if that's the foundation, that's the filter that we really look at our own interactions with our youth, and our children in general. And I mean, even if we look at it with humanity, right? Like how we would treat our neighbors and how we treat people, our colleagues at work. Like sometimes, yes, we care so much about our kids and we want them to be the best. And so sometimes they don't see that loving, they don't see the loving, respectful, kind version of us. We mean well, but it doesn't always come through. So just gentle reminders for ourselves, if we can tune into that. That's one thing. Another thing is really paying attention to our own mental health. So we've all gone through, we go through our own stressors. We may be having extreme difficulties at work. Is that coming home with us? Are we taking that out on the family? Are we finding ways to cope in a healthy way with the stressors, to have conversations, to, if we need a timeout, be able to model what that looks like for our children? So I would say, paying attention to our own mental health, and not discounting the research, like how impactful it is for our kids to see us take steps, acknowledge, talk about, I'm going through a really stressful time. When we mess up, and we will mess up, okay, because we're human. So it's okay. How do we come back from it? Modeling for them that it's okay for us to own up to our mistakes. If we were a little bit short, or we were a little bit, harsh with them, being able to say, you know what, I could have handled that a little bit differently. I'm sorry that I came off, I was impatient when we were having the conversation. Can we try this again? I want you to know I really care about you and I love you. And it's okay for us to say, I love you, and let them know. And I'm concerned, however, that, that does not excuse that I, maybe said 1, 2, 3, or did 1, 2, 3. Like, that's not an excuse for it. So for us to own up to that. Do you know how big that is for our kids to actually see that modeled?
Yeah.
Like, what? My parent is apologizing?
Yeah.
It's huge. Again, within the context of care, love, concern, right? So we have the love, respect, kindness piece, and that's how we communicate that part. Finding opportunities to spend time together. Okay, those are family rituals. Do we have dinner together where maybe they're able to hang out with their friends, but what the expectation is for our family is we're going to have dinner time X number of times a week, whatever it is, but engaging them, creating open dialogue with them. And the key part of the way that we can ensure that they're going to continue to talk to us is when we create a safe space for them to disagree, for them to bring up difficult, challenges or concepts or issues that they may be dealing with or they may hear about outside. I'd much rather my child come to me and talk to me about questions they may be having about anything than going outside and getting information from their, what do their peers know? What does Google know about what our values are, right? As a family. So by doing that, when they ask a question, it's literally, even if we're like, oh my goodness, what on earth are they saying? It's not showing that. It's being like, it's a great question. I'm so glad that, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Validate. If they're going through struggles, validating means that you are acknowledging the person's feelings and experiences. So there's that empathy piece versus like, what do you mean you're feeling this way? You shouldn't. Look at the other kids. They don't have half of what you have. You should be grateful. Now, we may be saying that in good intention, but what's that? What's that telling them? You don't have a right to feel what you're feeling. And the truth is, a feeling is a feeling. Like, they have a right to feel anything. Now, it's what we do with that. So all of those are opportunities. So again, being able to model those pieces with them, and then making dua. Lots of dua always, and connecting with just modeling the behaviors we want. So if you want them to be connected to the masjid, we want to be connected to the masjid. If we want them to be connected to good companionship, that good friendships that they have to see us. So we have to be living in a way that's in integrity with what we want them to do, so that we're practicing what we want them to be.
Exactly. MashaAllah. Jazakumullah khair, Sister Dina. I can have this conversation go on for so much longer. I learned so much. Thank you so much. And I can see the comments, I see people really enjoying and just asking great questions. So thank you so much. May Allah reward you for taking the time from the convention to spend an hour with us here. And we'll hopefully have another session with you sometime in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yes. So thank you so much for everyone else for tuning in. I just wanted to speak a little bit about what's coming next. So like I said, these back to school live sessions are every last Sunday of the month. The next one will be around Eid al-Adha time. So the title is Qurbani. It's more than the sacrifice. And that will be hosted by our newest core member, Brother Khalid. And that will happen on June 25th at 3 p.m. with Majid Mahmoud. So we really look forward to having you guys next month. And like I said in the beginning, this back to school program is so much more than just the giveaways. As you guys can see, it's the live sessions, it's the Empower Grant for teachers, and so much more. So thank you so much for tuning in. May Allah bless all those parents that are, having challenges with their children. And, may we all, go back to the deen and, the hadith and, really look into what, the best practices are into raising our families, inshallah. So thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.